Hello, everybody, and welcome officially to the first episode of the Cranberries and Dairy podcast, where we're going to be doing deep dives into Wisconsin history and its lore. Now, you might be asking, it's the first episode, what's up? What are you trying to get after here? And basically, what this podcast is to just teach others and even teach myself about interesting histories and stories from all around the state. That can be whether it's from Superior or Racine or anywhere in between. Personally, I wanted to use this as a way to learn about things I may have heard of growing up, or other people have told me they heard about growing up, or things that I've never even heard of or were taught in school that are important parts of what makes Wisconsin unique and different from the Midwest and even the whole U.S. This is going to be a little bit different than just a regular podcast. Obviously, podcasts, most people are just used to listening to it and then kind of sitting back, and that's all they're really doing. But along with posting the podcast, I'm also going to be doing a video follow-up to each episode, which is going to be called Live from WI. In Live from WI, we're going to be going to the locations or some of the places that we're talking about in that most recent episode and really trying to add more details with a little bit more of a visual take on it to try and give the experience of more of an official broadcast, if you will. There's also going to be a photo dump, which I will post after I post the official audio of the podcast. Shout out to Let's Get Haunted, Nat and Allie. I see you. I got that idea from them of doing the photo dumps with the episode. And I think it'll definitely help visualize what I'm talking about a little bit more throughout the episode, just to kind of give people the sense that they're there a little bit more when it comes to some of these stories and these histories. And as you can already tell, we have a topic picked out for the first episode. You might have looked at this and thought, man, it's kind of vague, what is the witch's house? If you're from a very specific part of Milwaukee, you might have heard of the witch's house. This might have been a little bit of a spooky rumor you might have heard about. But if you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, that is the point of this podcast, to hopefully teach others and really give them a little bit more on the inside of some things that some people may have just heard about. So let's start off with the physical building itself. Where is the witch's house in Wisconsin? Well, actually, you can find it. It's the official address is Milwaukee, mind you, but it also says when you look it up that it's in Fox Point. Both valid, but when you type it actually into a GPS, it'll say Milwaukee. It is actually located on 7328 North Beach Road. Now, as you can see, there is a name associated with the house. That's because it's known by a bunch of different names other than just the witch's house. It is also known as the Mary Nohl Art Environment, the Fox Point Art Yard, Fox Point Witch's House, and Mary Nohl's house. And if you haven't already been able to figure out, Mary Nohl is the person who this house revolves around. This is the house where she made her iconic art sculptures that can be seen all over her yard and just overall on the property itself. Now, originally when I was looking this up, one of the first things that came up is that the witch's house was listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and it was listed there on October 3rd, 2005. Now, I originally had no idea what that meant. I don't think anyone else has really heard of the National Register of Historic Places, so this kind of took me on a little bit of a path where I had to figure out what that was. And according to their website, the National Register of Historic Places is an official list of locations that are deemed worthy for preservation. They are under the Department of Natural Park Services of the federal government. They have more than 95,000 properties listed in 2019, which includes buildings, sites, districts, structures, and objects. Almost every county in the United States and even a few territory properties have at least one place listed in the National Register according to their site. So this is going to be obviously one of the many few in Milwaukee County, but if you live in, Washington County, Waukesha County, there's something on this list that's just for you to find out and discover. And I didn't even know this was a thing, that this was up for preservation. So that was just something that really kind of took me back. This was like one of the first things I found out in my research, and I was like, huh. So this has got to be some pretty cool stuff in this house, not just on the house. So the National Archive document for the witch's house categorizes it as a site with a number of resources being listed as one site, 2 buildings, and 60 objects. It's listed under historical functions as a landscape or dwelling and a recreation of culture and work of art. This site is considered one of Wisconsin's most original and outstanding works of art. Now, that's not my opinion, although after I researched this and kind of looked more into it, I think it's definitely interesting. I just thought that was kind of funny the way that they wrote it in the official document, or petition, if you will, to send off to get this place actually approved to be on the National Register of Historic Places. So according to the National Register of Historic Places continuation sheet, under the level of significance, it says, quote, "The nomination documentation supports the exceptional significance of this visual art environment at a statewide or regional level of significance," end quote. Basically, all that's stating is in the approval process, they have to deem if it's worthy or not. They kind of have like federal, state, regional, and the National Register did deem this site as of historical importance. So that is why they deemed it appropriate enough to preserve and go through this whole process of documenting what's in the house, what's around the house. So we kind of get a little bit more about the information in the document too of kind of numbers and what the house is made up of. And it says in the document that the witch's house is 1.37 acre property with the house, tool shed, and 60 concrete freestanding sculptures. Some of these pieces of work could weigh upwards of thousands of pounds, and that's each. Mind you, they're not talking about combined because, of course, when you look at some of these sculptures, you'll be like, yeah, I would say 60 concrete sculptures could equal thousands of pounds. Like, they're talking about individually. Some of these art pieces could weigh thousands of pounds. The house, which Mary Nohl lived in for most of her life, was slowly transformed inside and outside with original artwork. This included the small tool shed as well. So if you can imagine, just the tool shed that's in the back of your parents' yard, just covered inside and outside with original artwork, whether it's painting or sculptures, like, that's how you know you don't have enough room for your talent. It even says, too, that the inside of the house is just fully covered in Mary's artwork, from laying tiles in the hall to look like a Mondrian painting to several oil paintings, and even one very large oil painting taking up a whole west wall that leads up her staircase to the second floor. All of the artwork was solely created by Mary over a 40-year span, with even some international attention to the site. In the document, it also specifies the period of significance, which started in 1943 when she quit teaching and moved back into the home full-time, and in 2001 is when it ends, when she sadly passed away. Now, just thinking of the fact that a single woman was able to spend 40 years of her life working on art and filling up an entire house of art, I did not know anything like that was even possible. I'm sure if I started doing that now, quit my job, move back in with my parents, and then just started making art that covered the entire house and the yard, my parents would not be too happy with me. So I was kind of curious as to Mary herself. It kind of drove her to get into art, what the situation was with living at home, because obviously a lot of people feel very uncomfortable with having to put themselves in the situation of moving back home. So I focused a lot on what I could find about Mary Nohl as a person. And obviously, if we're going to talk about a person, that means that there's a start of their time, just like anything. And Mary Nohl's story started when she was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on September 6, 1914, to Leon and Emma Nohl. She was the youngest of 3 children. Her older brother Gene, who also went by Max, and Frederick. Frederick sadly did die a year before Mary was born, so she did not have a relationship with him. But the relationship she had with her older brother Gene was one like any other. She looked up to her brother Gene like a father figure and a hero figure. But her father Leo was one of those people who had a character about him, and his character was being the successful attorney. Her father Leo had a reputation just alone for being a very successful Milwaukee attorney, and that definitely made the family very successful as well. He was actually from Ripon as well and moved to Milwaukee. Her mother Emma was the daughter of a wealthy lumberman from Michigan and was a trained singer and pianist. Just looking at that fact alone, that's kind of, I would assume, where her interest in the arts kind of came from. She was a trained singer and pianist. This house must have been filled with just lovely songs and just joyous occasions. Because I would hope if you're willing to go through the training of being a singer and a pianist, that you would really stick with it. And I would love to imagine that this is where Mary was inspired by her mother, Emma. The family moved, or they did live on Stonewall Ave, but they also had a summer residence on Lake Michigan. Life on the water inspired Gene to become an engineer and become infamous for inventing the first helium and oxygen underwater breathing apparatus, which he used to set the world record for diving 420 feet into Lake Michigan in 1937. That record lasted for 11 years. This is just kind of a footnote in the Mary Nohl story too, but I kind of wanted to expand on it a little bit. Just imagine, you love, Lake Michigan, really cool. You're literally on the lake when you visit your other property, your lake property, whatever you would like to call it. And you just are so inspired by Lake Michigan that you create an invention that basically pioneered to modern day scuba equipment and how it kind of works with the gases and all of that. And you just revolutionize, the world in like the 1930s. That is just, to me, really interesting. And I would hope that seeing her brother succeed with college and making his own work too, and just being well known for that, really kind of inspired her as well. So overall, this family is just very talented, very strong. And I can see that Mary came from a very prominent family, not just in what they were able to succeed in, but also just the presence of them as well, because they weren't just some family that lived on the corner. These people in the Nohl family really did something with their lives. Now, of course, I'm getting sidetracked. We're going to go back to Mary's story. Mary graduated from 1932 from the Milwaukee University School, which she then insisted during her time at the Milwaukee University School that she was going to become an artist, and that's what she inevitably did. But, she can only go so far at the Milwaukee University School. So Mary and her friend then went to Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, where she spent a year taking art classes to then realize that the art program was too small for her needs. So then in 1933, she transferred to the School of Fine Arts in Chicago. After 5 years there, she got a bachelor's in fine arts and a teaching certificate a year after she got her bachelor's in 1937. So, obviously she realized, yep, this is what I want to do. I want to make art. Fantastic. So she tries to pursue it. And she figures out that this one program in Florida is just like, yeah, you guys can't meet my needs, so I'm going to transfer to the School of Fine Arts in Chicago. See ya. And obviously she enjoyed it enough to stay at that college because she even got a teaching certificate. And I know there's the kind of well-known expression of those who cannot do teach, but I think one of the things that really makes her different than that phrase and not having it apply as much is because she was willing to stick with it. And I feel like one of those things that you kind of have to do is know art and be passionate enough about it to be able to teach. Teaching art is kind of not one of those things that you can just kind of get shoved into. You kind of have to be able to demonstrate that talent. And I don't think with her legacy, either with the Nohl family name, that she was just going to kind of let this just set aside and just kind of be like a thing she had to do. I think this is definitely a plan that she made, not only because you have to make money, obviously, but also as a way, too, to then take that passion that she has for art and continue to do it in new and interesting ways that maybe she didn't know that she wanted to pursue at the time. After graduating, she then moved to Baltimore, Maryland, and taught art at a high school in Baltimore. It didn't really say. Whatever lucky school in Baltimore, Maryland had Mary Nohl as their teacher. Fantastic. But she did end up only teaching there for a year. Then she decided to move back to Milwaukee and taught at North Division High School. And, of course, that wasn't really enough for her there, so after a year of teaching at North Division, she then moved to teach at Steuben Junior High. After kind of moving, to her third school, she kind of realized that these schools were not giving her the satisfaction that she wanted. She just was not satisfied with teaching, and it did not really give her the time to focus on her own art that she wanted to do full time, because I'm sure she was very talented and just wanted to continue to be creative. So she decided then that she was going to go into a business where all she had to do was art. And that's what she did. And for the next 10 years, she focused on her own pottery business. And she even had an establishment built that she would sell her pottery and make it out of, which was located on 5644 Green Bay Road. This is where she sold all of her works and even had some people interested that she was able to ship this work out to 5 different states outside of the U.S. in the U.S. outside of Wisconsin. Her business got local attention not only because she was from a somewhat prominent local family, but because she was one of the few women who made a career in art in the years after World War II. So just imagine, you're basically a pioneer getting back into a society that is trying to struggle with what just happened. Very earth-shattering things back to back, World War I and World War II. And the whole image of what it meant to be a woman at that time was changing. More women had to go in the workplace. There was the Women's Baseball League and all of that. And to think that she was one of the few women who, this is not like the first women, this is the few women who made a career in art. Like, that's gotta be just in itself just fantastic and just like enough of an achievement, I would think. In 1954 though, what sucks is that she had to have her studio shut down to make room for the new I-43 expressway, cutting her pottery career shorter than she expected. So she did this for a decade, and because they decided to put in I-43, that was it. There was no more 5644 Green Bay Road. I would really like to see, obviously you can't be in a building forever. You're eventually going to have to retire or sell it or move on creatively to a different project. And I would have loved to see what they did with that building, but sadly we aren't able to figure that out. But this wasn't just a really disappointing year. This was also kind of a really important year as well, because within the same year, she also got 50 of her silverwork art pieces into the Milwaukee Art Museum. That's obviously not an easy thing to do. You can't just show up at the front door and be like, hey, I want to put my art in here. Like, this has got to be a rigorous process. And to think that 50 of her pieces, not just like 1 or 2, 50 of her silverwork pieces were accepted at the time is kind of interesting. And also the fact that it was known as the Milwaukee Art Institute at the time instead of the Milwaukee Art Museum. I would think that having her apply to the Milwaukee Art Institute would be a little bit nerve-wracking, especially because her career was pottery, it wasn't silverworking. And I think that's it shows how multi-talented Mary was. And some of those pieces that she sent off to the Milwaukee Art Institute were actually selected to also be put into the Smithsonian Institute art show. Now that's kind of a step up. That's not just like, I'm from Milwaukee, here's Milwaukee artist. This is the Smithsonian. They have a very prominent name attached to them, just like as the museum guys, especially like federally, They're in charge of like air and space and all of the other museums that are very important in preserving U.S. history in D.C. And I think just the fact that they wanted her art enough to put it in their own art show really had to show that Mary had some talent here, especially in silversmithing. And, obviously things are kind of on and up, especially in the 50s. But as soon as the turn of the decade happens in 1960, that's when things kind of started to go downhill for Mary's story. In 1960, tragically, her brother and sister-in-law were killed in a car accident, which left her alone to watch her elderly parents. Obviously, this has got to be a devastating blow on Mary specifically because she saw her older brother as such a hero figure. And now she just didn't really even get to say goodbye. And I think that's just devastating. I'm sure they were very close, especially for the fact that she just loved her brother so much and really just admired the things he was able to do. And now she has to take care of both of her parents. Like, I don't know what I would do in that situation. And on top of all of that, it wasn't even a year later that she lost her dad at 84. That can't be easy, especially on Mary and her mother, back to back, losing a son, a brother, and a father, just right there. And especially, too, her mother was elderly, so that obviously was enough on its own to be able to take care of the mother and then have to focus on father's funeral and then still grieving the loss of your brother. Like, that is so tragic. And a couple years later, in 1964, this was the year she eventually had to put her mother into a nursing home as she couldn't even be left alone. She died not too long after being admitted into the nursing home. Now, I can't think how devastating it was for like the span of 5 years for Mary to kind of lose her entire family. I don't know what I would do, and especially the fact that, now she's left alone in this world. But how they say every cloud has its silver lining, right? Well, in this situation, she actually was left the house that overlooked Lake Michigan, the one that her family moved into. When they decided to move to this residence full time, that was it. They sold the other property and they lived at this lakefront property on Lake Michigan, and now it was left to her. Along with that, obviously she got some inheritance from her father, her brother, probably being the next of kin for them too, now that the sister-in-law was also dead. So she was just kind of left in this situation where she got the house, she got the money, and this kind of gave her the experience that I think a lot of us maybe would like, maybe not in the tragic circumstances, but just gave her the freedom to then focus on whatever she wanted. She didn't have to work, she didn't have to be, a disingenuine when she showed up for a job. She had the freedom to make whatever art that she wanted and focus on her passion. And this is kind of where things started to happen. This is where she officially had this whole free reign of turning the house into what she wanted it to be, which is full of her art. Her works and her diary entries were published in several places in the 60s and 70s, which led to a lot of public attention to her house. In 1973, a 15-foot tall wooden sculpture in her yard was set on fire. So obviously she had maybe less than a decade to work on all of this stuff, even putting a 15-foot sculpture in her yard. And because she got some attention in the media, she was then having her sculptures burnt to the ground. Like, I can't even imagine that. And on top of that, she's got sculptures of hers being vandalized, and the neighbors on her street really didn't like her either. Obviously, if people are driving by your house all the time to see your cool, wacky sculptures, I'm sure the neighbors aren't too happy because you're going all over their yard at all hours of the night and all hours of the day, but the day is a little bit more forgivable depending on your actions. And because of the work that the neighbors were doing in their minds to really try and justify their actions, and nothing was really being done about it. Obviously, the police can't really stop people driving on a street. This is kind of where the rumors started to happen. The neighbors would kind of start saying these weird things about how Mary was a witch. She was secluded. You know, what could you possibly be doing in your house? You know, you don't have a job. I never see you leave it. I keep seeing these weird sculptures put up in your yard. And this kind of led to the main rumor that I hear a lot of people say that they know about the witch's house is that if you stepped foot onto her property, you would become one of her concrete statues. I know I definitely heard that. And that, I think, was one of the things that kind of, pun intended, cemented her and this legacy of the house. Because, you know, kids would then dare each other to go up to the house and, you know, see if they would turn into a statue or not. As people, you know, get a little bit older, they kind of start to plan for, you know, what's going to be next, you know, with their state, with their body and all of that. And one of the things that Mary started to really focus on when she started to reach the end of her life was she wanted to make sure that her artworks were protected, were preserved in some way. So she made a deal with the Kohler Foundation. So if you don't know what the Kohler Foundation is, the Kohler Foundation was founded in 1940, and it's basically just this nonprofit that is really focused on art preservation, grants, scholarships, and performing arts to really just keep, you know, art alive. And now that the Kohler Foundation was in communications with Mary Nohl and kind of were getting down to the point of really signing a contract with her, it was now the Kohler's responsibility to be in charge and responsible to preserve her work when she died. And in 1996, she deeded her entire collection to the foundation under the agreement that she could live in her home for the remainder of her life. You know, it was kind of getting to a point where she really needed to make the decisions, and she had a caretaker come and watch over her and live with her for a bit. But really, all she wanted to do, even at this point, after she figured out all the stuff with the Kohler Foundation, was just make art. And she essentially did that until she died. She continued to make art until her inevitable death that happened at the age of 7 in 2001. At this point now, the Kohler Foundation got the deed to the land and the rest of her estimated $11.3 million estate, which the Kohler Foundation decided that the $11.3 million estate would be given to the Greater Milwaukee Foundation to support visual arts and art education. And that basically is the story of Mary Nohl's life. She was just this really passionate artist, a prominent family member who's kind of the end of the Nohl name, you know? Obviously, there are more Nohls out there. I'm not saying this is literally the end of the line. But, you know, she had to take care of her family in the end, and she had to see everybody else die. And I couldn't imagine even having to take care of any of my parents, let alone my siblings. But yet, even throughout all of that, even through the ups and downs of her trying to figure out what she wanted with her life, what made her truly happy, you know, she was able to continue doing what she wanted, and she was able to live out the very small dream of being able to never work again and just do what you love. And that's so inspiring to me. I'm obviously not gonna figure it out so I can get millions of dollars and just kind of have my family die so I get those millions of dollars so I never have to work again. But I would love to do art or something like Mary Nohl. I see every once in a while there will be some pieces of her art kind of going around on social media, mainly just people being like, hey, remember this? And it's this documentary that they put out about Mary Nohl because, getting media attention kind of sparked interest in people trying to figure out, what's the story behind these people saying, hey, you're going to turn into a statue. And the fact that there was just a very upset community kind of around the house because they thought it was ugly. They didn't like the attention. And yeah, if you live on Lake Michigan, I'm sure those houses are not cheap. So they probably spend a lot of money to live there, and now they have to deal with this. But I just think that's fantastic. And the fact that this is now a preserved piece of history, not only by the Kohler Foundation, but by the federal government, I think is just something that is very exciting. I remember reading a little while ago that they were saying that they were going to move all the statues and stuff and the artwork from the Nohl house, and they were going to move it up to like the Kohler Foundation and their building and their headquarters. But I remember that article coming out I don't even remember when that came out. It came out, I think, a little before the preservation or something. I don't even remember. But the fact that I read that, it just kind of made me a little bit scared, So I looked it up on Google Maps, and I'm pretty sure it's pretty updated. But it looks like, as of right now, the witch's house is going to be here to stay. And by here, I obviously don't mean here where I'm recording, but I think it's just kind of interesting knowing the backstory of Mary Nohl and the family, and just those little Snapple cap type facts, but just the really interesting story of the Nohl family in general. I think it's just kind of cool. I think it's something unique, and when you see her artwork, it just it's different. There's so many different materials that they used and different styles that she worked in. She even did stained glass, and just looking at the photos that are part of the documentation is just really cool to see. Not gonna lie, the last photo I'm gonna put in the photo dump on the Instagram, which is at Weirdly Proud Wisconsin, by the way, is going to be is the one that really creeps me out the most. I'm not gonna lie. There's just this little floating man thing, and it just freaks me out. But I think that's very, I don't know, I love this story, I love just the fact that she was able to do what she wanted, and that's what made her happy. And she did that for 40 years, and she was able to just be happy and live out the rest of her life doing what she loved. And just, I don't know, I just think that's really cool, and it really inspires me to just kind of keep continuing to make art, and that's kind of why I wanted to do this as the first episode. I was thinking, since by the time I post this, it'll be Wisconsin's birthday. Happy 173rd, babe. You look fantastic. I just wanted to, do something about the story of Wisconsin, how we first got here, Marquette, whatever. But I don't know. I just thought that this story was kind of my inspiration to really look into Wisconsin history more and do research about something. And then eventually got me to the point where I'm like, let's do a podcast. I don't know. I hope something about Mary Nohl's story was very interesting to you. Even if you look into Jean Nohl, if you want to learn a little bit more about Leo, the father, or maybe even Emma, the mother. Or just if you're in the area, it's not really there's parking anywhere near the house. It is just like a residential area. But if you ever just drive by with your family, I think you'll kind of see just these weird sculptures in the yard, and you'll think like, what's up with that? And if you ever bring somebody along who doesn't even know the story of the witch's house, you can kind of explain the little lore behind it and be like, ooh, if you step on her yard, you'll turn it into a statue. And you can be like, oh, those statues were of kids who didn't listen, if you have your little kids with you or something. Just make sure, obviously, if you're going to visit this house, that you're respectful of the neighbors. They don't want to be bothered. But it's just very cool. And I haven't recorded the Live from WI segment of this episode yet, but I hope to get out there very soon. And just really kind of remember the memory of my mom kind of sharing that with me, and my mom telling me how they used to come up here and dare each other to step on the property. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be kind of like a little bit nostalgic for me, especially being right on the lake too. And I can't wait to film Live from WI. I can't wait to teach you guys more about Wisconsin history. And I just really hope that eventually this will become something greater where I can maybe do my own research about something that's happening in the state currently. I would just really like to know some of your thoughts about Mary Nohl. If you know anything more about the story that I didn't get to share, especially about Mary Nohl herself as a person, I would love to know more about that. And I would just really like to thank you for tuning in and listening for the first episode of Cranberries and Dairy. This is obviously a podcast that has a very specific focus. And even if this doesn't become anything greater than what it is right now, this is mainly just a passion project for myself. And I really hope you follow me in that passion project journey. I will have you guys listen to me soon. If you want to interact with me on social media, the Instagram account is at Weirdly Proud Wisconsin. No capitalizations, no spaces, no hyphens or anything. Just Weirdly Proud Wisconsin, straight up. Before each episode comes out, I will be putting out a little guess what the theme is the night before. I'm going to try and keep it on Saturdays. So if you like something to listen to on a Saturday, if you're just kind of hanging out, it's obviously not going to be super long episodes, but just something else to listen to. If you're interested in learning a little bit more, if you're going to go even visit a city that this story takes place in, that would be really cool. I would really appreciate it. If you care to look at my social media for any reason, your lovely host of the podcast will be at julia.sajdowitz, and I pretty much just use Instagram at this point. And I'm obviously going to be reposting whatever I post about new episodes coming out on my main social media too. But I really encourage you to follow at Weirdly Proud Wisconsin to make sure you get the photo dumps along with the episode. With that being said, thank you very much for listening. I very much appreciated teaching you something, and I hope you take something away from this and share it around and just really make yourself a little bit more proud of the state of Wisconsin. Take care, guys, and take care of the people around you.